Epic Mickey 3 is a cancelled platforming video game that was being developed by Junction Point Studios and published by Disney Interactive Studios. The game director, Warren Spector, always mentioned he had a story in mind to complete the trilogy since the first game was published. So let's break down the story elements, multiplayer, and concept art. As always, all the sources will be linked in the description below, so make sure to check those out and support those original writers. And with that out of the way, let's get into everything we know about the cancelled Epic Mickey 3. Let's start with the original plan for the game series, which was discussed in 2009, a year before the first Epic Mickey game was even released. Warren Spector, the game director, did an interview with 1UP promoting the first title, and he discussed the possibility of continuing the series further, depending on how the first game was received. He told the publication he already had 2 more games planned to create a trilogy, but had no guarantee that these games would happen. He said, quote, "I don't do anything that isn't extensible, and I will certainly feel like that I have not done my job if we cannot make other games in this world with these characters. In my head, I've got 2 more planned. In the business world of reality, those games have not approved. And who knows if we'll ever see them. I had 3 games planned for DSX, and you see where that got me." So even before the first game was released, Spector was considering where to take this franchise, which makes sense considering Spector got the game director job after pitching a video game project to Disney in 2005. And his pitch was so similar to a game they had already started development on that he was hired on as the project director. And then this project ended up becoming Epic Mickey, so he's been there since the beginning and has always had similar ideas to what Disney wanted to do. Spector gave additional details on this trilogy in an issue of Nintendo Power where Epic Mickey was the cover story. Spector went on and confirmed again that he has plans for a trilogy, and his basic outline for the trilogy was to use the first game to reintroduce Oswald. In the second game, Oswald would become a playable character, and he left the third game a mystery of what the progression would be, but using logical progression and based off the previous 2 games, fans have speculated this would mean that Oswald would become the main playable character and Mickey would become the side character. And for the most part, this is where speculation was left. Epic Mickey was then released in November of 2010, and less than a year after release, rumors started to circulate about a sequel when cover art concepts were seen in early test marketing in 2011. And then Epic Mickey The Power of 2 was released in November of 2012, so the franchise really started to pick up steam, and the release dates between the first and second game was almost no time at all, which was only 2 years. And that kind of leads us into the ending of Epic Mickey The Power of 2 and what this game was teasing for the future of the franchise. So to understand where the future of the series was headed, we need to quickly touch on the ending of Epic Mickey 2, which was setting up villains and potential story beats we would see in a continuation. The ending cutscene of Epic Mickey 2 shows all the Petes going into Ventureland with Gremlin Prescott trapped. And the ending dialogue says, quote, "Look at them all so happy, they aren't even going to know what hit them." And I don't really want to get into any speculation in this aspect, but it's safe to assume the studio thought a sequel might at least be a possibility, especially considering how fast the sequel for the original game was developed, and the title already got a spin-off for the Nintendo DS. And Spector reiterated the idea again of a trilogy in early 2012, a few months before the release of Epic Mickey 2. So once again, he was doubling down on, yes, this is a trilogy, and it makes sense with this cliffhanger ending that nope, not all the loose ends are tied up and we can expect more of this game. And then in December of 2012, in an interview with Red Bull, Spector discussed some future elements fans can expect in the game series. He said, quote, "Oh man, there's so many aspects of Disney's history to draw from. We'll never run out of material. There's all sorts of forgotten characters, concepts from films that were never made, rides that have been retired from the parks or never built at all. He said, quote, "We could map games for the next 80 years about Disney's last 80. I should probably keep some secrets, but I'd love to do something with all the rejected versions of Tinkerbell we saw in the archives. I think fans would get a huge kick out of that." And then Red Bull closes out saying that Spector won't say what he's working on next, though it does sound like he still wants to work on this Disney property and is still very excited about Disney's IP as a whole. And he closes out by saying, "I'd love to see the Disney Epic Mickey series continue. There are plenty of stories still to tell about Wasteland and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and Mickey Mouse. I'd love to see some Oswald games where he's on his own. He deserves a shot at solo stardom. Then there are the Duck games, Donald, Scrooge, etc. that are just waiting to be made. And a bunch of us at Junction Point have thoughts about Goofy and the Gremlins and 100 others." And a lot of this ends up being important later, so I'll touch on this later, especially the part about Donald. He continues on and says, "They're not interactive in this game," in reference to the music, but using songs as storytelling tools seem necessary for a game that claims to honor Disney's creative history. So in all of this, he mentions that they have almost complete access to past Disney concepts and story ideas, all of which is at least able to start a conversation for worlds and characters they can use in their game. We don't know if Disney would let them use everything, but the fact they're even letting them look at all this information makes it sound like they're open to whatever as long as it's been concepted at one point in the world of Disney. He mentions the Tinkerbell ideas. He also thinks that Oswald deserves his own game, which seems to most people that he was hinting at Epic Mickey 3. And even the comment about Donald Duck ends up becoming important later when there was another cancelled spin-off in this whole universe. And he also starts teasing here that they wanted to add more music elements in future games if they were given the opportunity. So he starts to lay out the groundwork of what the team was working at this time, just a little bit after the Epic Mickey 2 was released and the studio thought they were going to get a third title. Unfortunately, just a month after that Red Bull interview, in January of 2013, Disney shut down Junction Point Studios, and Warren Spector was not staying with Disney, which is in part due to the estimated lackluster sales of Epic Mickey 2, plus the launch of Disney Infinity, which was Disney's next big gaming project. And after the studio closed, it immediately shut down the possibility of the franchise continuing, considering Spector had been there since the beginning of the game and even when he was still pitching it and got to start very early on. And because he was such a massive creative force for the project, it wouldn't make sense to continue it without him. Then in 2015, Warren Spector did an AMA on Reddit where he was able to answer some questions about his career and really anything. And of course, Epic Mickey and Disney came up a few times, and he was actually able to talk relatively freely because he is not under any NDA or contract with Disney still, so he can talk as much as he wants about Epic Mickey. The first comment was in regards to the plot for Epic Mickey 3 and which features were planned. Spector said, quote, "In Mickey 3, I wanted to really up the multiplayer action. What we did in Mickey 2 was pretty simple. I also wanted to make a truly interactive musical game. I have some weird ideas about how to use music and how to make music in the context of a game that no music game has done yet." And when pressed for more details, he said, quote, "I also wanted to get some Wasteland characters out of the Wasteland and into the world of cartoons. Lots of fun to be had with that. More blah action too. There were lots of ideas kicking around." And a lot of this makes sense. Once again, the natural progression of where the series was headed. He wanted to add more musical elements, which was a bigger part in Epic Mickey 2. And a more complex multiplayer system, which once again was introduced in the second game. Another question that was relevant to Epic Mickey 3 asked if there were ever plans to include forgotten characters from the more recent Disney movies into Epic Mickey as a franchise. Warren responded saying, quote, "There were never plans to incorporate more recent characters, at least not until we left the Wasteland, which I really wanted to do in Mickey 3. I set a rule that nothing would appear in the game that happened after 1967, because I didn't want to include anything Walt himself didn't touch. We violated that rule more often than I'd like, and I'm surprised no one's ever called us on that, but it was still a rule. And he gives a big detail here, which is that, at least for the pitch of this game, Spectre wanted to have the characters leave the wasteland, which would have opened up a whole new world for the game and characters they could have brought in. He doesn't elaborate further, but once again, we assume that this is probably where the game was headed. And the last relevant question in the AMA asked Warren if he thinks Epic Mickey has a future at Disney, and he says, first, that it's a better question for Disney because they do still hold the rights, but he would be surprised if there were any more games in the series, but you never know. And then in a Twitter thread in 2017, Spectre shared even more details, including that Scrooge McDuck would have played a large role in the game, and the idea of bringing the Disney characters into the real world was another idea they were pitching as well. And the last tweet in this thread was actually referencing Epic Donald, and he said, I also had something very cool, to me at least, planned for Epic Donald, which was a spin-off game where, as it sounds, would have instead followed Donald Duck instead of Mickey and Oswald, which always seemed like Warren's big intention was to build this world past the need for Mickey with Oswald, with Hortensia, with Donald, and there was actually a little bit of information that we got leaked about this project as well, and it seems like it was all being made the same time as Epic Mickey 3. And then it wasn't until years after that Twitter thread that two pieces of concept art were released for the game. One piece of art was for Hortensia, which showed off early designs to make her a playable character, and the text describes her as a brawler and shows off some different aspects of the character, which lines up with the multiplayer focused components Spectre mentioned for the third game. So it's possible that Hortensia would have been playable as well with Oswald, and Mickey could have taken a side seat to them. And the other concept art is from the same concept artist who posted the picture of Hortensia, and they also were a concept artist for the first two games, so it makes sense that they'd work on Epic Mickey 3. But their art included a piece of Pete, who is trapped Sleeping Beauty and is wearing clothes that look like her. This art isn't confirmed technically to be from Epic Mickey 3, but the text and description for the art says it's from an abandoned project. And as I said before, it's the same concept artist who worked on all the Epic Mickey games, so most fans assume this is from Epic Mickey 3, right before the studio got shut down and then everyone had to go find new jobs, which I tend to believe as well. And before I get into the final news around Epic Mickey 3, there at one point was a pitched idea to Disney to create a follow-up to Epic Mickey called Epic Donald, which would have followed Donald Duck. The only official description we have for Epic Donald was from the concept artist Pat Block, who said, quote, in 2012, I had the very great pleasure and honor of working with Warren Spector and Junction Point on a follow-up to Disney's Epic Mickey and Epic Mickey 2. The game was to feature Donald Duck, Duckburg, and the assorted Classic World clan. I worked hard on a Carl Barks-based Duckburg, pulling scenes of the town from his comic and doing my best to keep a 1950s feeling spirit about the game world. Sadly, this was about the time Disney decided to switch over to its current gaming, more tablet-oriented gaming focus. While we are fully paid for our conceptual work on the project to date, it has not been made. Not much is really known about the game, except some concept art was posted, which I'll post a few images as we're talking about this, but I'll include more down in the description below. And the game was being concepted after the release of Epic Mickey 2, so it's not known if Epic Mickey 3 and this were being worked on at the same time or same studios, but it was being worked on, and it's assumed that Junction Point Studio was at least considering the idea of doing both. And Warren Spector teases on Twitter that there were cool ideas for Epic Donald as well, but doesn't elaborate further. So once again, we don't really know what this means. Would this have led into the multiplayer component? He said way early on that he had big plans for Donald Duck. We know Scrooge would have showed up in Epic Mickey 3, so there's room for crossover and things to happen, but we just aren't sure. The only real thing we know is that this was happening at one point, but details are still very under wraps for this project. And the last story is in the form of remake rumors that have circulated since December of 2019 when YouTuber Dre81 found on the LinkedIn account from PlayMagic CEO. The CEO stated their studio is working on a remake for a Disney IP action game for the PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, which to my knowledge still has not been announced. So I know they found this news in December of 2019. There was no confirmation in 2020, and now we're in 2021, and I believe there still is no confirmation. PlayMagic is a relatively quiet studio in general, and they only just finished their 13 remake in November of 2020, so it's not surprising that their other projects are most likely still years away and can remain unannounced. So even if they are working on some Disney remake, what is it? And most fans are starting to think it could be Epic Mickey. Are they going to remake the first 2 games or just the first game? And is it even a possibility that Disney would want to revisit this franchise? And we just really aren't too sure. Some fans have pointed to the fact Disney has started selling Epic Mickey merch again. Maybe they're working on this remake. Are they trying to reboot it? Once again, we just aren't sure. And even Warren Spector gave his 2 cents on Twitter and says it seems unlikely and says he doesn't see this happening. And for the most part, that is where we are left. It's really up for everyone to decide for themselves if they are going to hold out hope for a remake or true sequel to the Epic Mickey franchise or the spin-off Epic Donald, and if Disney will ever decide to bring this game series back. But that's where I'm going to end this video, and that is why Epic Mickey 3 was cancelled, and what we know about the game if it would have continued on in development. Some more multiplayer, potentially Hortensia as a playable character, Scrooge McDuck, Oswald taking a bigger seat in terms of playable characters, more musical elements, an Epic Donald crossover, so much more. It really would have been such a unique property if it continued on. As always, make sure to like and share this video, subscribe for weekly gaming news, and I will see you guys in the next one.